This is Lecture 68 in the ABCs of Communism, Bolshevism 2018. It will be in Volume 5, which will be out in a few months, on the Communism of South Asia. Our subject today is Nepal and primitive to modern communism. I don't recall what chapter that's going to be in your book when you get it, but at any rate, we're going to try and cover everything about Nepal for primitive to modern communism in this lecture and in that chapter. Now, the prehistoric sites of the Paleolithic, Mesolithic, and Neolithic in Nepal have been discovered in the Siwalik Hills of the Dang, D-A-N-G district. In November of 1997, Dr. Gudrun Corvinus found a hand axe on Satpan Hill in central Nepal that she dated it more than 730,000 years old. That would make it the oldest evidence of Acheulean culture on the Indian subcontinent. Accordingly, she had uncovered the first evidence of a migration into the region of today's Nepalese Siwalik Range during the Pleistocene. Now, the Tui Valley, T-U-I, is an appendix to Nepal's Dang Dun Basin and was taken by Dr. Gudrun Corvinus as a small-scale model for the whole area. Here, the Brahuti West sites are of special importance as they have a cultural sequence with units from the Paleolithic to the Neolithic, and at the base there is an early Paleolithic site dating 700,000 to 500,000 BP. In the Dang Valley, the Gadari site on the south bank of the Babai River is where Dr. Corvinus unearthed hand axes from the early Paleolithic, and she classifies these as Acheulean, or Acheulean, however you want to pronounce it. In the Deokuri Valley, Dr. Corvinus discovered the Arjun III Middle Paleolithic site, and she dates those artifacts between 100,000 and 70,000 years ago. Arjun III is a camp and factory site where smaller tools were produced using larger cobble tools as hammerstones. A thick sterile layer then separates this Middle Paleolithic site from a 12,000-year-old artifact layer on the top of the late Upper Paleolithic. Now, further east in the Siwalik Hills, she unearthed a Mesolithic culture she named the Patu, P-A-T-U, that dates to 7,000 years ago at the Rato River. The technology of this culture of the early Siwalik Hills Holocene is said to be similar to the Wabinian of Vietnam we discussed in Volume 3. Anyway, at the top of the Brahuti West, younger Neolithic remains, including polished axe fragments and pottery sherds, are located. Now, on New Year's Day of 2006, Dr. Corvinus was murdered in her flat in Pune's upscale Korogan Park district in the state of Maharashtra, India. There she had just finished writing her book. Now, apparently the object of the murder had been to steal her property, according to the police, and her ashes were scattered later in the Western Ghats, G-A-T-S. Her book is part of her amazing legacy. It's called Prehistoric Cultures in Nepal, from the early Paleolithic to the Neolithic, and the Quaternary Geology of the Dang, Deokuri Dun Valleys, in 2 volumes, published in Wiesbaden, Germany, by Harasowitz. I've only read the abstracts of the first volume. I haven't yet read the second volume. I only mention that because, as you're going to see, the agricultural revolution in Nepal is not well known. Now, whatever we know about it is in that second volume. So, for those of you who have interest in the archaeology of the Neolithic in Nepal, I would say get that second volume and read that also. Now, as for general comments, the agricultural revolution in Nepal, as one might expect, we have primitive communism featuring an agricultural revolution of a unique type. It is what specialists today call an AFS, or agroforestry system. It is a system with deep roots in Nepalese prehistory, where agricultural food production emerged from broad-spectrum wild forest resource exploitation. AFS shifting cultivation dates to the Neolithic period, around 9,000 BP, and is still extensively practiced in Nepal. The Nepalese Tongyam variety of AFS was started in 1972 at the Tamagadi area of the Bara, B-A-R-A district, in central Nepal. Now, conflict with capitalists who wanted to clear-cut areas to obtain lumber required settlement. Now, this Nepalese settlement between small farmers and the big cap foresters gave rise to a rebirth of agroforestry. And essentially what it amounts to is that farmers are sharing the same land as the trees for shifting periods of time. Now, prehistorically, such sharing was driven by the transition from hunting, gathering, collecting to horticulture, and eventually true agriculture. Neolithic tools found in the Tui Valley indicate that people have been living in the Himalayan region for at least 9,000 years in this kind of a cultural system. However, these finds are few and far from sufficient to define the Neolithic in Nepal in any but the most general terms. Again, you're going to want to take a look at Dr. Corvinus's second volume. At any rate, in short, nothing is yet known archaeologically about the original tribal agricultural stage or of the succeeding chiefdom stages. Now, what we do know about the succeeding stages is what I have grouped as the Kurata, K-R-A-T-A, chief's mythology. What we do have is extensive mythical stories about what appear to have been ATCs, that is, advanced theocratic chiefdoms. And I have grouped them together as the Kurata ATC/Kingdom period. Now, the Kurata Kingdom, or Kirat, in Sanskrit literature and Hindu mythology, refers to any kingdom of the Kurata people who were dwellers mostly in the eastern Himalayas. They are said to have taken part in the Kurukshetra War along with Parvatas, that is, mountaineers, and other Himalayan tribes. Yet the entire so-called 18-day war is so mixed up with the religious mythology as to be about as accurate as the fairy tales of the Christian Old Testament. So the Kurata period witnessed people living throughout in the hills and valleys of the Himalayas in Nepal and Bhutan. The Kurata people also occupied the Indian states of Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, West Bengal, Darjeeling, Sikkim, Assam, and Tripura. Even the western mountains of Pakistan feature occupation by Kiratas. Now, eventually, the Kurata dynasty was established by a man who called himself king named Yalamber. In other words, Kurata territories extended along the Himalayan belt of mountain ranges. And these Kurata people had chiefs who were armed with hunting weapons and engaged in hunting activities, eating fruits, roots, and they were attired in animal skins or clothes made out of tree bark. In legend, they occupied the Tibetan slopes and spread to the Arunachal Pradesh in the region of Karusha on the seacoast. This could mean to the mouths of the Ganges in Bangladesh and or the mouths of Sindhu in Pakistan. Legendarily, they lived on both sides of the Lohicha Mountains in eastern Assam and western Arunachal Pradesh. Now, myths mention that the chiefs took tribute and carried gifts to ceremonies, including huge loads of sandal and black aloe, and heaps upon heaps of valuable skins, gold, and perfumes. The stories are further embellished with tales of 10,000 serving girls of their own race, and many beautiful animals and birds of remote countries, and much gold of great splendor that was procured from the nearby mountains. Now we come to nearly 2,000 years of slave and then feudal kingdoms across these foothills and mountains of the Himalayas, which brings me to the section I call Slave and Feudal Stages of Nepal. Now there's considerable amount of historical data about Nepal. However, historical sources for Nepal often use Nepal-era dates that are called Nepal Sambat dates, or SNS, from the National Lunar Calendar of Nepal. That era started on 20 October AD 879. It was in widespread use for all daily purposes until the beginning of the 20th century. Nepal Sambat dates appear on coins, stone, and copper plate inscriptions, royal decrees, chronicles, Hindu and Buddhist manuscripts, legal documents, and correspondence. Today it is used for ceremonial purposes and to determine the dates to celebrate religious festivals and commemorate birthdays and death anniversaries. The year AD 2013 corresponds to 1134 in Nepal Sambat, that is NS. AD 2013 is 2071, in the Bikram Sambat, or BS, solar calendar, established by the Indian Emperor Vikramaditya, and it is recognized as the official calendar of Nepal. In addition to Bikram Samwat, the Gregorian calendar is also widely accepted in the Nepal community. To simplify things, from here on I shall use the BC AD dates where feasible. So, to take the period from AD 1097 to AD 1775 to begin with, there is a dynastic sequence of slavocrat and feudal aristocrat ruling families for the nearly 2 millennia between AD 1097 and 1950. Since we have historical records, there is considerable data available about all of them. For our purposes, we shall pick up the story from the time that the Chinese Communist Party created the PRC, or People's Republic of China, in 1949 and liberated Tibet the following year on 7 October 1950. That was when units of the Chinese People's Liberation Army crossed the Yangtze River into Kham, K-H-A-M, that borders on the mountain kingdoms of the eastern province of Tibet in the foothills of the Himalayas. Now, the coming of communism to the borders of the mountain kingdoms and principalities of the Himalayas in India coincides with the creation of the Communist Party of Nepal, which happened just a year, or just a few weeks after the formation of the PRC in Calcutta, India. And that's where the Communist Party of Nepal was founded on the 15th of September 1949. And its first fight was against the feudal Rana regime, R-A-N-A. Now, that regime had been created by a man named Jung Bahadur Rana. He was the first ruler of that dynasty, and Rana slavocrat rulers were titled Shri Teen and Maharaja. Jung Bahadur Rana codified laws and modernized the state's bureaucracy. And then there were 9 Rana PMs, prime ministers, that took that hereditary office. All were made Maharajas of Lamjung and Kaski. Now, in 1924, slavery was abolished under Prime Minister Chandra Shamsher Jai Bahadur Rana. The first Communist Party of Nepal General Secretary was Pushpa Lal Shrestha. Other members, and then I give their names, but that won't matter to you right now. In 1951, the CPN, or Communist Party of Nepal, played an important role in the uprising that overthrew the Rana regime. After the Raksha Dal Revolt in 1952, which I go ahead and explain, and you can read it if you like in your textbook, the Communist Party of Nepal was banned on January 24th, 1952. In 1954, the first party congress was held clandestinely in Patan. Mamahan Adhikari was elected General Secretary. In April of '56, the ban on the party was lifted, and in 1957, the Second Party Congress was held in Kathmandu. For the first time, the party could hold its Congress openly. Kishore Jung Rahamaji was elected General Secretary of the party, and the Congress approved a Republican Party program, that is, a call for a republic. 3 years later, in 1960, Raya Maji supported the royal coup. Now, this prompted Ajoy Ghosh, leader of the Communist Party of India, to advise Raya Maji to rectify his position and retain the struggle against the monarchy. In early 1961, a few months later, all political parties were banned in Nepal. The government initiated a wave of repression, especially against the Communist Party of Nepal. And Raya Maji had, however, expressed a certain faith in the politics of the monarch, something that provoked stern reaction from other sectors of the party. And to resolve that conflict, a central plenum, that is, or full meeting, was convened in Darbhanga, India, and that full session lasted a month. 3 lines emerged, and they were: 1, a pro-constitutional monarchy line led by Raya Maji; 2, a line that wanted to restore the dissolved parliament and launch broad mass movements led by Pushpa Lal; and 3, a third line which favored a constitutional assembly led by Mohan Bikram Singh. The third line emerged victorious, but its sole representative in the Central Committee was Singh. So, in April 1962, one section of the party convened a third-party Congress in Varanasi, India. The Congress approved a program of national democratic revolution proposed by Tulsi Lal Amacha and elected Tulsi Lal as General Secretary. The Congress decided to expel Ryamji. Now, however, the sector led by Ryamji, who controlled the Central Committee, did not recognize this Congress as legitimate, so that effectively the party had now been divided into two. One Communist Party led by Tulsi Lal Amacha and one Communist Party led by Kesharjong Ryamji. These in turn faced further splits, mergers, and renaming. Now, I'm just going to go over this briefly because it's going to take us where we want to go, to the formation of the Communist Party of Nepal Maoist Center. That was currently a junior partner, that is at that time, in a coalition government led by the Nepali Congress Party. It was founded in 1994 after breaking away from the Communist Party of Nepal Unity Center. The party had led three governments from 2008 to 2009 and from 2016 to 2017 under Pushpa Kamal Dahal and from 2013 to 2015 under Baburam Bhattacharya. Now, that party was previously known as the Communist Party of Nepal Maoist, that is CPM, until 2009, and as the Unified Communist Party of Nepal Maoist until 2016. In the 2013 elections, the party won 80 of the 575 elected seats, becoming the third largest party in the Constituent Assembly of Nepal. Now, in the period 1994 to 1996, the party was formed in 1994 following a split in the Communist Party of Nepal Unity into two factions, one A led by Pushpa Kamal Dahal and the other B led by Nirmal Lama. Now, the electoral front of the party was called the United People's Front of Nepal, and it also split into two. The faction led by Baburam Bhattacharya allied with the Pushpa Kamal Dahal-led Communist Party of Nepal, or Unity Center, both United People's Fronts of Nepal, decided to register with the Election Commission. The Commission only recognized B, the Nirmal Lama Party, so Baburam Bhattacharya responded by calling for a boycott of the 94 midterm elections. Now, the Communist Party of Nepal Unity, led by Pushpa Kamal Dahal, went underground after the split and began preparations for its next phase of struggle. In March 1995, the Communist Party of Nepal Unity held its third full session, where the party renamed itself the Communist Party of Nepal Maoist, CPM. It decided that the true liberation of the people required all efforts to be concentrated for the development of a people's war that would usher in the new people's democratic form of government, unquote. And it decided to give up its policy of taking part in parliamentary elections altogether. This March meeting was followed by 6 months of preparation to recast the old organizational structure into a fighting machine. In September of '95, the Central Committee of the party adopted the, quote, plan for the historic initiation of the People's War, unquote. It then began public meetings around the country under the aegis of the United People's Front of Nepal, UPFN, as part of its final political ideological preparation. The party launched the, quote, Sija campaign, unquote, in Rolpa and Rukum, named after the Sisni and Jaljalala mountains in the two districts, to propagate the ideology of Marxism, Leninism, Maoism. In October 1995, during the Sija campaign, a fight began between supporters of the United People's Front of Nepal and the Nepali Congress and the Rashtriya Prajatantra Party at a village in the eastern part of Rukum. The newly formed government under Sher Bahudra Deuba arrested the UPFN supporters. In November of '95, the police then launched, quote, Operation Romeo, unquote. Operation Romeo was labeled as an operation to control a rise in the criminal activities in Rolpa, but in reality it was just an excuse to destroy the Reds, and resulted in the arbitrary arrest and detention of hundreds of members of all of the left of center parties, implementation of the operation featured rapes, executions, and disappearances. In January of '96, a few months later, the Political Bureau of the Central Committee of the CPNM met and made the final decision on the historic initiation of the People's War, and that was to begin on February 13th of 1996. A few days before that, on February 4th, 1996, Baburam Bhattacharya led a three-member delegation of the United People's Front of Nepal to present a memorandum to Prime Minister Sher Bahadur Deuba. Now, the memorandum warned that unless the government took initiative to fulfill the 40-point demands by February 17th, the UFPN would launch an armed revolution. Now we come to the People's War itself. Its first year, 1996 to 2001. That first year began in '96. The Office of the Small Farmers Development Program run by the Agricultural Development Bank was overrun in Gorkha district, and the loan papers were destroyed. This was followed in the evening by attacks on police posts in Afbeskat Rari in Rakum, Hulari in Rolpa, Sindhugadi in Sindhuli, and the People's War had begun. In 1997, after the Communist Party of Nepal, unified, came into government, violence between both sides stopped, but the issues were unresolved. The government formed a task force to look into the Maoist activities and search for solutions in April '97 under CPN UML MP Prem Singh Dhami, but the commission report was ultimately shelved in August of the same year, that is '97. In May of '97, a local election was called, but polls could not be held in 87 village development committees due to opposition by the CPNM. In July of '97, the government responded with legislation authorizing suppression. That was called the Terrorist and Destructive Activities Control and Punishment Act. Mass protests from all sectors of society forced the government to withdraw the law before it was placed in front of Parliament. So in year two, on the 13th of February 1988, the second anniversary of the People's War, the CPNM announced the existence of a Central Military Commission under Prachanda. That was the party name of a man we'll be coming to in a moment. By May 1998, 51 village development committees in the Rolpa district and western Nepal were under CPNM control and operated under a parallel administration called the People's Government. When the regime's new prime minister went on tour of the CPNM base area, he realized the situation. After an attack on Kalikatar in Tanahun, the home district of the regime's home minister, the state launched Operation Kilo Sera II. Now, it was another Operation Romeo search and kill strategy against the CPNM. But unlike Operation Romeo, however, which had been concentrated in the western hills, Kilo Sera II was directed against all CPNM-controlled regions of the country. From mid-'98 onwards, an unprecedented number of Reds, their supporters, and non-combatant civilians were caught in the middle and killed. The government admitted to at least 500 people having been killed under Kilo Sera II. In 1999, the CPNM boycotted the elections but did not disrupt the polls. In December of '99, the regime formed what it called the High-Level Committee to provide suggestions to solve the Maoist problem under Sher Bahadur Deuba. In February 2000, the regime authorized talks with the CPNM. Contact was established with the CPNM leadership that responded positively in a letter from Pushpa Kamal Dahal. That's the man whose party name is Prashanda. Now, however, the regime was not serious and said, quote, "The first priority of the government will be to restore law and order in the country to protect lives of the people," unquote. Following this, attacks on the police were resumed. In late September of 2000, the CPNM troops overran Dunai, the district headquarters of Dolpa. Following this attack, the regime's Royal Nepal Army was ordered deployed in 16 districts. However, the army mutinied and refused to fight the CPNM. On the 26th of February 2001, a few months later, the CPNM announced that they had just conducted their second national conference, and Pushpa Kamal Dahal, the party name of Prachanda, whose party name was Prachanda, had been elected chairman. Furthermore, it was announced that the CPNM's guiding ideology was Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, Prachanda path. In March 2001, the royal regime published the names of 294 individuals who were in police custody, charged with being sympathizers and or members of the CPNM. In early April of that year, 2001, the CPNM conducted devastating attacks on cop shops in Rukam and Dalakay districts, killing 70 policemen. The Reds announced that no negotiations would be held with the government until its then current Prime Minister stepped down. So on the 7th of July 2001, the birthday of the new king, Gyanendra, the rebel army of the CPNM killed 41 policemen in Golmi, Lamjung, and Nuwakot districts. Later that month, they attacked a police post in Rolpa and took 69 policemen hostage. The Kerala government tried to deploy the army, but again, the soldiers mutinied. Kerala resigned as prime minister, and Sher Bahadur Deuba replaced him, immediately announcing a ceasefire in a war his troops had refused to fight. The CPNM concurred and halted their operations. Now, in mid-August of 2001, a meeting between the mainstream communist parties and the CPNM was arranged by the Communist Party of Nepal near Siliguri. Now, nothing emerged from this meeting since Prachanda's request for support of the CPNM call for a republic was turned down. Then, on the 30th of August of 2001, the first official meeting between the government and the CPNM was held. The Deputy Prime Minister led the royalist regime's side, and the CPNM sent Krishna Bahadur Mahara. Now, the parties agreed to hold talks again, and 2 weeks later, a second meet was held in western Nepal. Then the CPNM placed a full set of demands on the table, and these fell into three categories. The first was for a Constituent Assembly, an interim government, and a republic. The second category dealt with treaties with India and policies regarding India, and the third category was about going public with details of arrested Maoists and a rollback of police operations. The Parliament passed the Armed Police Force Act in August of 2001. It called for the king, who was the supreme commander of the army and was the only one who could mobilize the formation of an armed police force, to counter the CPNM as the Royal Nepal Army. In September 2001, the People's Army was restructured into the People's Liberation Army and was placed under the supreme command of Comrade Prachanda. The PLA consisted of the bulk of the Maoist guerrilla force, and that was about 20,000 strong. The CPBN also had a militia assigned guard duty in CPNM-controlled village development committees. Before the third round of talks were going to be held, the regime scrapped the public security regulations and freed 68 prisoners. The CPNM gave up their call for a republic and an interim government. On the 13th of November 2001, the third round of talks were held, but that was inconclusive as demands for a Constituent Assembly were rejected by the government, a call backed by other political parties, however. And on the 21st of November 2001, a week later, the CPNM boss Prachanda said the talks were about to end, and 2 days after that, on 23 November 2001, the CPNM ended the 4-month-long ceasefire. It attacked government and private cop shops throughout the country and attacked army barracks for the first time. The CPNM attacked Gorari and Dang and briefly took control of the district headquarters, where they killed more than 2 police and 24 police and army personnel and blew up the government's offices, freed all of the prisoners from the local jail, and stole Nepalese rupees of 65 million in gold and silver from local banks. Now this coincided with attacks all over the country, the most serious of which was in Sianja, where 14 policemen were killed. This was followed 2 days later by an attack on the headquarters and army barracks in the Sulukhumbu district, capturing a substantial amount of ammunition and sophisticated weapons, and the CPNM announced the formation of a 37-member United Revolutionary People's Council of Nepal, headed by Baburam Bhattacharya. Following this, the Prime Minister, Sher Bahadur Deuba, imposed a state of emergency under what he called an anti-terrorist ordinance, and this was a law that labeled the CPNM a terrorist organization. After failure to increase the time for the state of emergency, King Gyanendra, on the recommendation of the Prime Minister, dissolved the Parliament in May of 2002 and called for elections in November of that year. Then, following a surprise attack in the Sandikara in the Argakanchi district, which killed 65 cops, the PM asked for more time to conduct the polls, so that in October 2002, the king promptly removed Deuba for incompetence and resumed the country's executive authority, which he exercised for the next 4 years, under a period I call the King's Rule of 2002 to 2006. Now, on the 26th of January of 2003, the Maoists killed the Inspector General of the Armed Police Force, Krishna Mohan Shrestha, his wife, and a bodyguard. Afterwards, the government decided to retract the terrorist label and dropped bounties against the CPNM, and another ceasefire was announced on the 29th of January of 2003. Now, a few months later, on 27 April 2003, the peace talks were resumed, and this time Deputy PM Badri Prasad Mandal led the regime's delegation. Baburam Bhattacharya represented the CPNM, and on the 10th of May 2003, another round of talks were held, following which the government decided to restrict army movement to within 5 kilometers of their barracks, forming a code of conduct during the ceasefire and releasing some top CPNM officers. Now, on the 17th of August 2002, a third round of talks began, and on the 27th of August, 10 days later, hostilities were resumed after the regime refused the formation of a Constituent Assembly. There were intermittent ceasefires, although fighting was continuous for the next 2 years. Now, monarchy was overthrown in 2005. The CPNM followed a strategy of seeking permanent peace accords while forming a pro-democratic alliance with several other mainstream political parties in opposition to the monarchical dictatorship of King Gyanendra. In 2006, massive popular uprisings and protests numbering over 1 million people and a prolonged general strike, along with violent clashes between protesters and the Nepalese army, the monarchy finally capitulated. The CPNM gained international recognition. In the aftermath of the conflict, several Western European powers removed the CPNM from their government's terrorist list, and even the Gringo regime gave up by 2012, when the U.S. State Department saw discretion as the better part of valor and delisted the CPNM from their phony terror organization list. And that brings us to the 2006-2008 Comprehensive Peace Accord. The civil war fought by the CPNM had created the foundation for the establishment of the Nepal Republic. It created grassroots political consciousness among the people of the need for national, social, and economic transformation. The 10-year-long civil war ended with these peace talks that produced a 12-point agreement. The 7-party alliance and the CPNM in Delhi created a path for a peaceful transition from rule by the king, including a permanent end to the monarchy. However, the caps behind the king tried to reinstate the parliament. The CPNM insisted that the attempt to do so was a betrayal of the people, and instead the king should honor his pledge to end the monarchy as a punishment for his crimes. CPNM Chairman Prachanda said that the civil war had ended only to be waged again by the reinstated parliament. Nevertheless, The peace accord gave the 20,000-member People's Liberation Army a barracks under the supervision of the United Nations Mission in Nepal, UNMIN. The interim constitution of Nepal gave a permanent position to these soldiers, including a monthly allowance. The CPNM leaders knew that the revolution had not ended, the form of struggle was changed, and the People's Army might well be needed again. And that brings us to the Constituent Assembly, the years 2008 to 2015. In early 2008, the CPNM won the majority of seats in the Nepalese Constituent Assembly. International observers, like the Carter Center, said that the election was held in a peaceful, orderly manner, and they were satisfied. The Nepalese Congress Party and the Communist Party of Nepal Unified were unhappy and bitched about it. But at any rate, on November 19th of 2013, the Constituent Assembly election was held. The CPNM contested 240 seats and won 80 of them. In the most recent developments, through 2018, CPNM boss Pushpa Kamal Dahal, that is Prachanda, became Prime Minister for the second time on 3 August 2016, resigning 10 months later, 25 May 2017. Now for a few comments on Nepal's Communist Party ideology and how it fits with the Chinese People's Republic of China foreign policy. The CPNM announced a People's War on 13 February 1996 under the slogan, quote, "Let us march ahead on the path of struggle toward establishing the people's rule by wrecking the reactionary ruling system of state," unquote. They emphasized the philosophy of Mao Zedong, namely that, quote, "political power grows out of the barrel of a gun," unquote. The CPNM aim in the People's War was to establish a people's democracy in Nepal. They viewed it as an historical revolt against feudalism, imperialism, and revisionism. As you recall, the catalyst for declaring the People's War was the failure of the Nepalese government to respond to a memorandum presented by its representatives to Prime Minister Sher Bahadur Dehuba on 4 February of 96, that had listed 40 demands related to nationalism, democracy, and livelihood. These included the abolition of royal privileges, the promulgation of a new constitution, and the abrogation of the Mahakali Treaty with India, which regulated the distribution of water and electricity, as well as the delineation of the border between the two countries. In a second conference of the CPNM, a post of chairman was created for party chief Prachanda. Until then, the titular head had been its general secretary. At any rate, a report titled, quote, "The Great Leap Forward, an Inevitable Deed of History," unquote, was presented by Prachanda. The CPNM thus adopted the Prachanda Path as its ideology. Now, Prachanda Path, in essence, is a different kind of uprising which can be described as the fusion of a protracted people's war strategy, which was adopted by Mao in China, and the Russian model of urban-based armed revolution. Professor Lok Rajmaral, in his writing about Prachanda Path, says that this doctrine does not break with Marxism-Leninism, but specifically adapts it to Nepalese conditions. The adoption of Prachanda Path, after the Second National Conference, provided what the party needed, that is, a clear vision of how to move ahead after 5 years of People's War. Now, senior Maoist leader Mohan Vaidya, party name Kiran, says, just as Marxism was born in Germany, Leninism in Russia, and Maoism in China, Prachanda Path is Nepal's identity of revolution. Just as Marxism has 3 facets, philosophy, political economy, and scientific socialism, Prachanda Path is a combination of all 3 totally in Nepal's political context. The adoption of Prachanda Path was inspired by Peru's Shining Path that we have discussed in Volume 2, and is the title of Book 3 in my autobiography, which is also available at Kindle Books, called Shining Path, The Peruvian Revolution. At any rate, speaking about the party's philosophy, Maoist Chairman Prachanda says, "Our party considers Prachanda's path to be an enrichment of Marxism, Leninism, and Maoism." A few comments on women in the party. Women have always been prominent in the CPNM recruiting profile. 1/3 of the cadre and the combatants during the Nepalese Civil War were women. Every village under CPNM control had a revolutionary women's mass organization. There were 2 female intelligence officers in each unit of 35 to 40 fighters. Babaram Batari, on the 18th of April of 2003, said that 50% of cadres at the lower level, 30% of soldiers, and 10% of members of the Central Committee of his party were women. Durga Pokrel, then chairman of the National Women's Commission, who visited more than 25 CPNM-controlled districts, said on the 3rd of July of 2003 at the Nepal Council of World Affairs that 40% of cadres were women. The All Nepal Women's Revolutionary Association is the CPNM's female mass organization. The CPNM used children as messengers, cooks, porters, and suppliers. Regardless of role, all children received rudimentary military training concerning explosives so they would be able to recognize and avoid landmines. The party denies that any of its soldiers during the war were less than 18 years of age. They also claim that they have cared for orphans of adult soldiers killed in the war, and that these children were not placed in danger. Now for a few comments on Naxalism, N-A-X-A-L-I-S-M. In 1989, the CPNM had well-established linkages with the Communist Party of India, Maoist. That was then and now leading a protracted people's war throughout the Indian subcontinent. That year, they began the process of laying a corridor jointly. In August 2001, what was referred to as the Revolutionary Corridor, or RC, extended from Nepal across 6 Indian states, including Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Andhra Pradesh, Odisha, and Madhya Pradesh. The Nepal and Indian members of the Naxalite movement, in a meeting at Siliguri in the Indian state of West Bengal, renamed it as the Compact Revolutionary Zone, or CRZ. The Indian fighters are known as Naxalites, or Naxals, after an uprising that began decades ago, centered in the village of Naxalbari. Nepalese Maoists had sent their delegates to the March 21 Congress of the PWG held at Abusmar in the Bastar region of Chhattisgarh. Now, the establishment of the CRZ, the Compact Revolutionary Zone, gave a wider space and platform for all of the proscribed Nepal and Indian Naxalite organizations so they could strengthen their bases in both the countries. During the Civil War, the CPNM gathered important support from organizations in South Asia. Having visited several districts in India, the CPNM chairman Prachanda studied the challenges of launching an armed struggle and drafted a doctrine of strategy and tactics. The CPNM participated in a South Asian conference where they held discussions with that Civil War group and other Maoist communist groups. The party achieved a unified view about how to conduct a civil war. Having realized the necessity of spreading the party's message to the world, the party came up with the decision to host a website which was to spread the knowledge about the Nepalese Revolution. Thus, www.cpnm.org was hosted with the help of some of the fraternal Maoist organizations in Europe. The CPNM played an initiative role in introducing a real communist party in Bhutan. The new party in Bhutan has been greatly inspired from the Nepalese Civil War, as we shall soon see in these lectures. And that brings us to a conclusion of our discussion on Nepal, which we've covered an awful lot from early Paleolithic 730,000 years ago up until this year, 2018. I hope that this will be helpful to you as you proceed in your study of South Asia. And that's it for the moment.